The morning of July 18, 2015, was unusually calm along the Oregon coast, the kind of stillness that feels like the ocean is holding its breath. Jake Miller and Aiden Ross had planned this dive for weeks, obsessing over sonar maps, abandoned military records, and whispers from old fishermen about an off-limits wreck no one dared to approach. The wreck was said to rest beyond the usual diving limits, partially buried beneath a trench, and completely undocumented by any modern maps. That made it irresistible. For two adventurous friends in their early 20s, it wasn't just a dive, it was a thrill-seeking mission wrapped in mystery. They launched their small rental boat just before sunrise, carrying 2 oxygen tanks, each, waterproof flashlights, and a GoPro mounted on Jake's shoulder. Both had certifications in deep-sea diving and had trained for high-pressure conditions, so there were no second thoughts. From the radio logs, we know they checked in with the Coast Guard at 6:11 a.m., reporting fair weather and clear water. That was the last official transmission. According to GPS data from the rented vessel, the boat drifted for about 4 hours before going completely still, anchored at the edge of the uncharted zone where the ghost wreck was rumored to be. What happened next is stitched together only from fragments, a few minutes of dive footage later recovered, and pieces of damaged equipment that washed ashore 2 days later. The GoPro footage, corrupted but partially viewable, showed Jake and Aiden descending into cold blue darkness, passing coral-covered debris that didn't match any known wreck. Then came something strange, a massive, corroded steel structure, protruding from the seabed like the spine of a sunken monster. Their lights flickered briefly as they approached it, then static, and then nothing. When they didn't return, by late afternoon, the rental company reported the boat as overdue. A search and rescue operation began within hours, combing the area with sonar, divers, and helicopters. They found the boat intact, gently rocking on the waves, all equipment inside, untouched. But the divers were gone. No blood, no struggle, no distress signal. Just their gear, 2 extra oxygen tanks, and an unopened survival kit, left on deck as if they planned to be back in minutes. But they never resurfaced. The media called it a freak diving accident. Investigators cited strong underwater currents, equipment failure, maybe even a cave collapse, but none of the theories held up. The sea was calm. Their gear was new. And most disturbingly, neither Jake's nor Aiden's body was ever found. For their families, especially Jake's mother, Linda, the lack of closure became a wound that never healed. And deep down, some believed the ocean didn't take them by force. It hid something. In the days immediately following the disappearance, Linda Miller transformed from a quiet single mother into a woman possessed by purpose. Where others grieved, she planned. While friends brought casseroles and comfort, Linda charted ocean currents, devoured naval blueprints, and called every dive expert she could find within a 1,000-mile radius. She wouldn't accept the word accident. Her son Jake was a calculated, careful diver. She knew his instincts, his discipline, and his deep respect for the sea. If he was truly gone, she needed proof. And the fact that no body had been recovered only hardened her resolve. Something was wrong. Linda began by investigating the coordinates of Jake's last dive. She managed to access GPS logs from the boat rental company and cross-referenced them with maritime reports, discovering that the dive site was located near a classified Cold War exclusion zone, one that had been redacted from newer maps. That alone raised red flags. She reached out to retired naval officers, hoping to uncover decommissioned projects or forgotten structures. Some were sympathetic. One even warned her to leave it alone before she stirred up things best left buried. She didn't listen. Instead, she started building what would become her obsession, a room in her house entirely dedicated to Jake's case. That room became a shrine and a war room. The walls were covered in topographical maps, diver depth logs, sonar images, and a growing collection of hand-pinned theories. There were labeled folders, official reports, unexplained currents, missing divers, similar cases. Some nights she slept on the floor surrounded by newspaper clippings and unanswered emails. On her desk, always visible, sat Jake's childhood photo in a cracked glass frame, a reminder of the boy who loved ocean documentaries and made paper submarines from cereal boxes. She wasn't just grieving a son. She was hunting for a truth no one else wanted to see. Over the years, Linda attended conferences on deep-sea anomalies, joined fringe online communities about military cover-ups, and even paid private divers to explore areas the Coast Guard had long since deemed off-limits, but every effort either came up empty or was quietly shut down. Once, a diver she'd hired returned visibly shaken, refusing to speak of what he saw, and later sent her a single anonymous note, "You're not supposed to find it." That note became her fuel, and her fear. Because now she knew she wasn't crazy. Something was being hidden. By the 10th anniversary of Jake's disappearance, everyone around Linda had moved on. Friends stopped calling. Extended family urged her to let go. But she never did. The house had aged just like her, but her mission remained intact. On a rainy night in early 2025, she revisited Jake's hard drive for what she thought was the 100th time. She scrubbed through the corrupted footage frame by frame, until, somehow, something new caught her eye. A flicker, a flash, and then, a shape in the sand. A hatch, one that looked entirely out of place, and with that single moment, her decade-long search reignited into something far more terrifying and far more real than she had ever imagined. For years, Linda had combed through Jake's recovered footage with the desperation of someone trying to hear a whisper through static. The GoPro memory card had been water damaged, its video files partially corrupted, most of the footage glitched, looped, or turned to black after a few minutes underwater. Investigators dismissed it as unusable. But Linda never accepted that. She learned how to restore fragmented data, consulted with video forensics experts, and used software that could extract frames from broken clips. It was obsessive, exhausting work. But she believed one thing with absolute certainty: Jake had recorded something important. Something no one else had noticed. Then, one night, under the flicker of a dying desk lamp, Linda paused a broken segment at just the right second. It was barely visible, a 2-second flash between digital noise and shadow, but there it was, a curved metal hatch, partially buried in silt and tangled with seaweed, reflecting the light from Jake's dive torch. The edges looked manufactured, not natural, clean and symmetrical, completely at odds with the jagged wreckage nearby. It wasn't part of the supposed shipwreck they had gone to explore. This hatch was something different. Something intentional. Linda stared at the frame for hours, her breath shallow, her fingers trembling. Determined to get a clearer view, she enhanced the image using video filters. The hatch seemed to have markings, faded, indecipherable symbols or maybe numbers, but most were obscured. What caught her attention was the shape. A rectangular indentation, almost like a keypad, next to what resembled a locking mechanism. The placement was odd. If this were part of a sunken vessel, why was the hatch designed to open vertically into the seabed, as if it led down into something? And why would such a structure exist in a zone supposedly void of any active or historic naval presence? The more Linda stared, the more questions surfaced. Had Jake and Aiden discovered something buried beneath the wreck, not a ship, but a sealed chamber or facility? Was this hatch part of a larger structure, perhaps even an old government installation? Her mind swirled with terrifying possibilities. Biological labs, weapons storage, covert Cold War projects. It sounded absurd, except the hatch was real. It was on camera. And it explained why everything after that point in the footage had turned to static. Had they tried to open it? Had something come out? The next morning, Linda sent the frame to 3 different independent underwater engineers. One replied. He was anonymous, replying only with a burner email and a warning. That's not shipped grade. That's reinforced substructure, Cold War era, possibly older. Not something civilians were ever meant to find. Linda didn't sleep for 2 nights, because in that brief flash of metal and shadow, she realized that this wasn't just the site of a tragic accident. It was a place deliberately hidden, deliberately forgotten, and Jake may have gotten too close to a secret meant to stay buried in the dark. After identifying the hatch in Jake's footage, Linda knew she couldn't go to the authorities. She had tried that route before, with no results. In fact, the last time she reported her suspicions, a government official visited her home, subtly suggesting she accept her son's fate and stop digging through classified maritime zones. It wasn't a threat, exactly, but it was enough to make her cautious. This time, she didn't ask for permission. She found an underground community of divers, the kind who specialized in off-grid recoveries and exploring zones marked with warnings rather than tourist signs. Most turned her down. One didn't. He called himself Malik, a veteran deep-sea salvage diver with a past wrapped in rumors of illegal recovery. He didn't ask many questions. Once Linda showed him the footage frame, he went quiet. Then he nodded once and said, "You're not the first to ask about this place. But you might be the first who wants the truth instead of treasure. A week later, they were en route to the same GPS coordinates Jake and Aiden had visited 10 years prior. Malik brought a small unmarked vessel and a two-person dive team. Linda, despite her age and lack of diving experience, insisted on going along. This wasn't a job, it was personal. The water that morning felt colder than Linda expected, as if the ocean itself knew what secrets were buried below. Visibility was poor, the currents eerily still. The dive team suited up and slipped into the water. Linda remained on board, watching their progress via a live feed from their helmet cameras. At first, everything looked like typical seafloor, rock formations, coral, scattered debris, but then they saw it, the same hatch Jake had filmed. It was still there. More rusted, more overgrown, but undeniably artificial. And now, they could see more. A circular perimeter around the hatch, like a pressure-sealed vault built into the seabed itself. Malik signaled to his team to begin excavation. They cleared silt, seaweed, and metallic debris, revealing a full entrance panel. It was old, Cold War, for sure, but intact. There were faded stenciled letters, too degraded to read fully, but one line stood out. Partially legible under layers of grime, authorized access only sublevel 7. A diver placed his hand on the hatch's locking wheel. It turned. Slowly, with a grinding groan of rusted metal, the hatch opened inward. What they found was not waterlogged wreckage but a hollow tunnel, descending downward into pure darkness. And it wasn't filled with water. It was filled with air. Linda watched, her knuckles white, as the team slipped inside. Their helmet, light-scanned metal walls, moss-covered stairwells, and scattered debris papers, glass, cables, all eerily preserved. No one spoke. The place had the feel of something abandoned in a hurry, or buried intentionally. Then Malik's voice came through the radio, low and tense. "This isn't a wreck. This was a station. And it looks like it was evacuated fast." Linda's heart pounded. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the monitor. Because for the first time in 10 years, she knew for certain. Jake had been here, and now she was following his footsteps, straight into whatever secret he had uncovered before vanishing. As the dive team moved deeper into the submerged tunnel, it became clear that this was no ordinary ruin. This was a self-contained facility, hidden beneath the ocean floor and somehow still partially operational after decades of abandonment. The walls were reinforced steel, lined with rusted panels and light fixtures, long extinguished. Faded warning labels marked the corridors in half-erased text. Biohazard, restricted access, and chillingly, containment level. Despite being submerged for years, the structure held a dry atmosphere, protected by thick pressure-sealed doors that had somehow survived time and scrutiny. The team moved cautiously, stepping over shattered glass, overturned chairs, and scattered papers fossilized by damp air. Most rooms were empty, stripped clean, or in complete disrepair, but the third chamber held something different, a monitoring station. Its glass cracked, but some of the old analog equipment still intact. Old data reels lay scattered on the floor beside an emergency clipboard dated August 2007. That sent a jolt through Linda as she listened from above. This facility had been active just 8 years before her son disappeared, long after it should have been decommissioned, if it had ever officially existed at all. She began to wonder, what exactly had this place been used for? Then came the most disturbing discovery, a corridor lined with sealed doors, each marked with stenciled numbers. Some were dented from the inside. Others had strange claw-like gouges down the metal. One door was ajar, revealing a small chamber with 2 cots, a metal desk, and a journal sealed in a watertight bag, sitting untouched on the table. Malik's gloved hands carefully retrieved it. On the first page, written in familiar, slanted handwriting, were the words, "Day 14. We're still alive, but barely. If someone finds this, we didn't drown. Please tell my mom I didn't stop looking." It was signed, Jake Miller. Linda gasped. The blood drained from her face. After a decade of questions, here was proof her son had not died during the dive. He had survived long enough to write a journal and hide it where he hoped someone would one day find it. As Malik flipped through the pages, Jake's words painted a grim picture. He and Aiden had become trapped after discovering the hatch and entering the facility. The door had sealed behind them, and their exit was blocked. Supplies were limited. They rationed food and water from emergency kits and explored the labyrinth of forgotten rooms, hoping to find another way out. The deeper into the journal Malik read, the more fragmented Jake's writing became. Some pages spoke of strange noises, mechanical hums, and distant bangs, even though they believed they were alone. Others hinted at rooms they were afraid to enter, locked chambers marked with symbols Jake didn't understand. The final entry was dated day 32. The writing was shaky, smudged, and cut off halfway through a sentence. But one line stood out in heavy ink, underlined 3 times. "We shouldn't have opened that door." Malik stopped reading. Linda, on the boat above, sat in silence. What had her son seen? What had he let loose? After reading Jake's journal, the dive team pressed further into the facility with a renewed sense of urgency and growing unease. The halls grew narrower, colder, and darker the deeper they went, as if the very walls were swallowing light. Malik noted that some of the doors had been welded shut from the outside, while others bore impact marks that looked disturbingly human, fists or tools pounding in vain to get out. Whatever had happened down here, it wasn't a simple evacuation, it was a containment, a desperate, possibly failed, attempt to lock something in. One room, deeper in the sublevels, revealed evidence of medical experimentation, stainless steel tables, shattered vials, and charts featuring anatomical diagrams not entirely human. Bones lay in the corner, not animal, not human, but something malformed, almost twisted in design. The dive team didn't speak. They only filmed, their cameras shaking slightly as they panned across evidence of things that shouldn't have existed. One diver muttered over the combs, "This place wasn't just research, it was isolation. They were keeping something in here." Linda, listening from the boat, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the sea air. It was the first time she truly feared the answer to her own question. More documents were found in sealed lockers, declassified files with heavy redaction, dated back to 1964, referencing Project Hecate, something tied to deep-sea biological adaptation experiments and controlled host trials. While most of the language was vague or coded, one phrase appeared again and again in the recovered pages: "No surface contact authorized under any condition." Jake and Aiden had unknowingly stepped into a facility designed to study, or imprison, something no one ever wanted released. And the fact that they survived down here for weeks, that wasn't just luck. It suggested something even more terrifying. They weren't alone. Toward the far end of the facility, the team entered what seemed to be a debriefing or observation room, overlooking a thick glass chamber now shattered inward. Red emergency lights blinked faintly above. There was a mural-sized whiteboard filled with handwritten notes, partially preserved and now rotting. One phrase stood out at the top in bold black ink: "Phase 4 breach equals initiate lockdown. No retrieval. Erase records." Below it, scrawled, hurriedly in different handwriting, was something even more disturbing: "It remembers faces. Don't try to speak to it. Don't let it speak to you." No one could explain what it referred to. The logs never mentioned a subject name, but the signs were clear. Something escaped. Back on the boat, Linda sat in stunned silence as she received the footage and photos in real time. She had always feared Jake had died, terrified and alone, but the reality was worse. He and Aiden had found something monstrous, something deliberately hidden and buried by people who didn't intend for anyone to return. Whatever was down there was never meant to reach the surface. And Jake's final messages weren't just cries for help, they were warnings. Warnings that Linda had now ignored. By opening the very doors he had died trying to close. Within 72 hours of the dive team's discovery, everything changed. Malik and his crew surfaced and returned to port quietly, refusing to speak about what they had seen. Linda received copies of the footage and Jake's journal, but before she could share them publicly, her home internet went down. Her email accounts were locked, and by the next morning, her computer had been remotely wiped. It was subtle at first, almost deniable, but then came the knock on her door. 2 men in gray suits, no badges, no names, just one chilling sentence: "You were never there, and you never found anything." They didn't threaten her. They didn't need to. The message was clear: stop, or disappear. When Linda tried to contact Malik again, his number was disconnected. His boat was gone. Friends she had confided in were suddenly unwilling to speak. Even the private forums she had posted the images on all shut down within 24 hours. It was as if a digital eraser had swept through every trace of the dive's discovery. What little she managed to save, a few blurry screenshots, one corrupted clip, and Jake's water-damaged journal now lived in a locked fireproof box under her bed. The world above had moved on. But Linda hadn't, she couldn't, because she knew now that Jake had been silenced, and someone powerful wanted to silence her next. Weeks passed, then months. The ocean seemed normal again. But one night, around 2:17 a.m., Linda's phone rang. A voice, distorted, mechanical, like it was underwater, whispered a single phrase before the line went dead. "He's not gone. He's still in there." She didn't sleep for 3 nights after that. Because she recognized the cadence, the breath between the words. It sounded like Jake. But how could that be? He had survived for 32 days, maybe longer. Could he still be alive, trapped somewhere deeper? Or was this something else? Something using his voice. Then came the final straw. Linda received an unmarked envelope with no return address, postmarked from Anchorage, Alaska. Inside was a single Polaroid, grainy, dark, and stained, showing what appeared to be a figure standing at the edge of the same ocean trench where the hatch had been. The figure wore a diving suit, but the face, barely visible through the helmet's fogged visor, looked eerily familiar. It wasn't just Jake. It was older, changed, as if he had aged without the world, surviving in a place where time worked differently. On the back of the photo, written in smudged ink, "The facility isn't empty. It never was." Linda's hands shook for hours after reading it. Authorities never reopened the case. In fact, within weeks, a new maritime exclusion zone was placed over the area, this time enforced by naval patrols. No divers were allowed near it. No journalists would cover it. The hatch, if it was still there, was buried once again, not just beneath sand, but beneath layers of secrecy. Linda lives quietly now, never far from the coast, and never quite at peace. She often walks the shore at night, scanning the waves, listening for something. A signal. A whisper. A voice she once heard as a baby's laugh, now possibly trapped, twisted, and transformed somewhere beneath miles of black water, and every so often, she finds something washed up on the shore. That shouldn't be there. A page, a tag, a fragment of gear. Always damp, always marked with his name. To this day, Jake Miller and Aiden Ross remain officially listed as lost at sea. No criminal investigation was ever reopened. No press coverage ever followed up. And every trace of the facility, the hatch, the journal, the footage was either erased, buried, or sealed behind silence. But Linda knows what she saw, what she touched, what she felt. And late at night, when the world quiets down, she still hears the faint hum of that forgotten place, in her memories, like it's calling her back. Sometimes she wonders if Jake ever truly died, or if he became a part of whatever was left behind, trapped, watching, waiting, and whether he was trying to warn her, or trying to bring her closer. The answers remain buried in the cold black deep in that forgotten vault of steel and silence beneath the sea. And so, the story ends where it began, with 2 boys chasing adventure, and opening something that should have never been touched. Somewhere in the ocean, a door was opened, and maybe, just maybe, it never fully closed.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.